again, we would like to also thank Balazi, who was instrumental in making the first event back in 1988 happen, and Kenyatta, who passed away, who also was the responsible person for leading us to the Gracie Mansion when David Dinkins, after being borough president and proclaiming this day, became later on the first African-American mayor. And when we entered that room, Kenyatta greeted Dinkins, Mayor Dinkins, and said, "This is a man who prayed for you." And he pointed to Sheikh Mahmoud Murtada, and Dinkins said, "Prayers do work." We also cannot forget Abdurrahman here, who's on my right-hand side, along with Sayyid Qasim, and I myself, and parents of African Americans who, if you remember, sent their children, the number was 41, I believe, to Tuba so that they could study the Quran in Al-Azhar Institute. And Sheikh Abdul Qadir radiallahu anhu gave his home to Sheikh Mahmoud Murtada. So a lot of things happen. We, as immigrants, first sent, even prior to sending the 41 children, we sent the first 2 or 3, actually 4 children to Sheikh Abdul Lahad. Sheikh Ali is here. He participated in purchasing the tickets, so was Njaga Silla and other brothers whose name I cannot remember. The first trip made by African American children to Tuba was back in 1984. And there was Falak, there was Muhammad, there was Abdul Rashid, there was Isa. Muhammad today is a captain in the American Army who memorized the Quran through Sheikh Abdul Lahad's recommendation to Karim Fall, who had them in their homes. So these are things that we have to mention because it is noteworthy. I think we have been celebrating this day for 20 years, but let us remember the reason we are here to celebrate this day, July 28th, as well as other days throughout the United States proclaimed by other mayors. That person was Sheikh Ahmad Bamba, Khadim Rasul. Let us remember the 33 years of confrontation, the 33 years of peaceful war he waged against a mighty colonial power. This man suffered on account of proclaiming the oneness of God. That was the only reason he was sent to exile. To be able to freely worship God. Of course, there are other spiritual matters attached to that. I'm not going to get into those details. But we have to mention a couple of verses that he himself wrote so that those who are here for the first time may leave this room asking more questions rather than getting answers. He said in his own word, "Sababu ghaibati an Allah arada an anala minhu jaa wa an akuna shafiyan liqawmi wa an akuna khadiman fi dawmi." The reason for this exile, based upon the unseen verdict, is that God in his mighty position has sought to place me in a lofty station. And at the same time, God has willed that I be the servant of the messenger of God and also be an interlocutor to the African diaspora by and large. This is highly significant. So we will meditate on that. We will continue to meditate on that. And I think those learned men who may not be familiar with those kind of verses should ponder upon those verses. These are verses of highly mystical value. But of course, the entire creation is based on a mystical setting. That was the reason he was exiled. And that exile lasted for about almost 8 years, less 4 months. In other words, 7 years and 8 months. I just came to discover that he was exiled as far as Angola, in the Cabinda forest. Angola was a former Portuguese colony. The same question we've been posing remains unanswered. What happened during a nearly 8-year exile between Khadim Rasoul and the French colonial power? What happened in Gabon? What happened in Angola? We have archives that have vanished from the libraries of Gabon. What happened in Gabon? We have archives that have vanished from Nantes, from Cheville-la-Rue, from Hamburg, from the British Museum of London, and other places. These are questions that scholars, academicians alike, need to answer, especially historians. What happened during that crucial period? We don't know anything about it as far as how history should be expressed is concerned. Of course, all scholars that are here present, through investigating the writings of the Sheikh, will come across verses illustrating an event or another. But based on the French archives, based on what the French military officials have written during that 8-year period, we have the right to know. The world has the right to know. So hopefully our friends, researchers, will be as motivated as I am to try to search and find out the truth. Because this man, who has a black skin, came for the world.